There are moments in your life when you feel as if you're not choosing anymore. You're reacting, repeating, returning to the same kinds of people, the same fears, the same invisible walls, even when everything in you says you should be free by now. And somewhere beneath all of it, there's a strange feeling you can't quite explain, as if your life is following instructions you don't remember writing. Maybe this is why certain doors never opened, why certain relationships felt familiar before they even began, why success sometimes frightened you more than failure, and why a part of you keeps obeying rules no one is speaking out loud. What if the life you're living is not only shaped by what happened to you, but by something you silently agreed to before you knew agreement was possible? And what if the reason this message found you now is because that contract is finally starting to break? There is a strange moment in life when you begin to notice that some of your choices don't feel like choices. You say yes before you know why. You apologize before anyone accuses you. You avoid certain dreams not because they are impossible, but because something in you feels forbidden from wanting them too loudly. And the most unsettling part is that no one seems to be forcing you. The command is coming from inside. This is where the invisible contract begins to reveal itself. Not as a document, not as a curse, not as some dramatic punishment written into fate, but as a silent agreement you've been living under for so long that it started to feel like your personality. You may call it being responsible, being realistic, being loyal, being careful, being mature. But sometimes those words are just elegant names for obedience. At some point, without realizing it, you may have agreed that love had to be earned. That peace required silence. That safety meant hiding the parts of yourself that made others uncomfortable. That wanting too much would make you selfish. That being seen would also mean being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. And once a person accepts those rules deeply enough, they don't need anyone outside them to enforce the prison anymore. This is why certain patterns feel stronger than your conscious intentions. You can read every book, make every promise, start again with real sincerity, and still find yourself back inside the same emotional architecture. Different city, different face, different opportunity, same fear, same shrinking, same invisible ceiling lowering itself the moment you begin to rise. The hidden truth is that many people are not trapped by what they want. They are trapped by what they once permitted. They permitted fear to speak with authority. They permitted guilt to decide what was acceptable. They permitted old voices to become inner law. And because these agreements were formed in silence, they often remain unquestioned for years, disguised as instinct, fate, or just the way I am. But a contract you don't remember making can still shape everything you believe you deserve. It can decide how much love feels safe, how much success feels allowed, how much freedom your nervous system can tolerate before it pulls you back into the familiar. And the first clue is usually not found in your future. It is found in the first world that taught you what reality was supposed to cost. Before you had language for pain, you were already learning the laws of the world. You watched faces. You studied tones. You felt which rooms were safe and which rooms required you to disappear a little. A child does not understand psychology. A child understands atmosphere, and atmosphere becomes scripture long before the mind learns how to question it. This is the first signature, not written with ink, but with emotion. The way love arrived, the way anger filled the room, the way truth was punished, ignored, laughed at, or welcomed, the way your small body learned whether it was safer to speak, please, perform, withdraw, become useful, or become invisible. What you later called my nature may have begun as your earliest strategy for survival. Maybe you became the one who never needed too much, the one who sensed everyone's mood before they said a word, the one who made people laugh so they wouldn't notice the tension, the one who achieved because achievement made you easier to love, the one who stayed quiet because honesty once made the air dangerous. And years later, You may still be living by vows you never consciously made. I must not disappoint. I must stay small. I must be useful. I must not be too sensitive. I must carry what no one else wants to face. These sentences may never have been spoken directly, but the nervous system heard them anyway. It heard them in silence, in absence, in reactions, in the subtle withdrawal of affection. And once the nervous system believes a rule protects love, it will defend that rule even when the rule is destroying you. This is why adulthood can feel strangely haunted. You meet new people, but old emotional laws keep entering the room. Someone pulls away, and suddenly you are not your current age anymore. A door opens, and instead of joy, you feel panic. Someone truly sees you, and instead of relief, you feel exposed. The present becomes a stage where the past keeps performing through your body. But childhood is not only the place where you were wounded, it is also the hidden temple where your first contract with reality was formed. And until you see what was signed there, you may keep mistaking familiar pain for destiny. You may keep calling old fear intuition. You may keep confusing emotional memory with truth. And just when you begin to ask, was this really mine? Another layer appears, because the family was only the first temple. The world was waiting to add its own clauses. After the family writes the first clauses, the world begins to whisper the rest. It doesn't feel like control because it arrives dressed as normal life. You are taught what success should look like, what beauty should resemble, what kind of ambition deserves respect, what kind of silence makes you acceptable. And slowly, without noticing, you begin chasing images that were never born inside you. You call them goals. You call them standards. You call them growing up. But something in you still feels strangely absent from the life you're building. This is the social spell. It doesn't need chains because it trains desire itself. It tells you what to envy before you understand what you truly value. It teaches you to fear being ordinary, yet also punishes you for being too different. It praises your productivity while quietly stealing your presence. And if you obey long enough, you may reach everything you were told to want and still feel like you never arrived anywhere real. There is a particular emptiness that comes from living inside someone else's definition of a good life. You can be admired and feel unseen. You can be busy and feel useless. You can be surrounded and feel untouched. You can be progressing and still sense that your soul is standing somewhere far behind you, waiting for you to notice the path has become foreign. This is why some people don't break down when they fail. They break down when they finally succeed at becoming someone they never truly were. The hidden truth is that not every desire inside you belongs to you. Some desires were installed through repetition. Some were inherited from people who were also afraid. Some were planted by a culture that profits from your insecurity, your comparison, your hunger to prove that you matter. And because these desires are loud, they can easily drown out the quieter voice that has been trying to guide you back to what is real. A true calling usually doesn't scream. It returns. It appears in small fascinations, strange pulls, recurring images, dreams you can't forget, moments when time feels different around certain ideas or places. A programmed hunger, on the other hand, often feels restless even when you feed it. It gives you a temporary high, then leaves you needing more proof, more applause, more evidence that you are finally enough. And this is the difference most people are never taught to see. At some point, you may begin to feel disconnected from things you once believed you wanted. Not because you are lost, but because the spell is weakening. Old ambitions may start to feel hollow. Old identities may become too tight. Old measures of worth may stop convincing your heart. And when that happens, the world may not understand you anymore, because the moment you stop wanting what you were trained to want, you also stop playing the role that made other people comfortable. Every invisible contract creates a role, and every role creates people who quietly depend on you staying inside it. You may have been the strong one, the calm one, the useful one, the forgiving one, the one who understands everyone, the one who never asks for too much. At first, this role may have felt like love. It may have given you belonging, approval, identity. But over time, it became a cage with your name written beautifully on the door. This is one of the hardest truths to recognize. Some relationships do not only love you, they love the version of you that keeps the system undisturbed. They love your patience because it protects them from accountability. They love your silence because it keeps difficult truths buried. They love your strength because it means they don't have to notice how tired you are. And when you begin to change, they may call your freedom selfish simply because your obedience once made their life easier. Maybe you've felt this already. The moment you set a boundary, someone acted wounded. The moment you stopped rescuing, someone accused you of becoming cold. The moment you told the truth, the room became tense, not because you were cruel, but because the old contract had been exposed. People often say they want you to heal, but some only want you to heal enough to function better in the same role, not enough to leave it. This is why awakening can feel strangely lonely. You may expect clarity to bring peace immediately, but first it often brings friction. The people who benefited from your unconscious agreement may not celebrate when you withdraw your consent. They may try to pull you back through guilt, nostalgia, anger, confusion, or sudden affection. Not always because they are evil. Sometimes because your old role was part of the emotional furniture of their world. The psychological insight is simple, but painful. A system will often resist the person who changes because change reveals what the system was built to avoid. If you were the caretaker, your exhaustion may have been hiding someone else's irresponsibility. If you were the silent one, your silence may have been protecting someone else's denial. If you were the guilty one, your guilt may have been keeping the peace at the cost of your own truth. And once you stop carrying what was never yours, everyone has to feel the weight you used to absorb. This is where freedom can first feel like betrayal. Not because you are betraying love, but because you are betraying the agreement that taught you love required self-abandonment. And the more you step out of the role, the more you begin to see who knew you and who only knew your function. That realization can hurt. It can empty rooms. It can change the sound of familiar voices. But it also reveals the next clue. The contract was never only held in relationships. It was enforced through repetition, returning again and again until you finally learned to read the pattern. The contract does not usually announce itself through one dramatic event. It reveals itself through repetition. The same emotional scene returning with different faces. The same kind of rejection wearing a new name. The same silence after you finally open your heart. The same fear appearing right before you cross a threshold. And after enough repetitions, you may begin to wonder if life is trying to show you something. Maybe you keep attracting people who need you, but cannot truly meet you. Maybe you keep reaching the edge of success and suddenly lose energy, clarity, or confidence. Maybe every time something good begins to happen, an old fear rises as if happiness itself is unsafe. Maybe you leave one situation only to find the same pattern waiting somewhere else. At first, it feels unfair. Then it starts to feel symbolic. This is where many people misunderstand their own lives. They think repetition means they are broken. They think it means they are unlucky, cursed, or somehow incapable of change. But a pattern is not proof that you are doomed. A pattern is evidence that something unconscious is still active. It is the hidden agreement trying to survive by recreating the conditions that made it feel necessary. The mind may say, "I want something different." But the deeper system may still be saying, "Different is dangerous." This is why you can consciously desire love while unconsciously choosing distance. You can want visibility while hiding from the moment you are seen. You can want peace while remaining loyal to chaos, because chaos once felt like home. The body often obeys the oldest law, not the newest intention. And this is why the same scene keeps returning. Not because life is cruel, not because you are being punished, but because the forgotten contract is asking to be read. The repetition is like a message written in symbols. Here is where you give yourself away. Here is where you abandon your truth. Here is where you mistake familiarity for destiny. The pattern repeats because the agreement beneath it has not yet been seen clearly enough to lose authority. Once you begin to notice this, ordinary life becomes strange in a new way. A conversation feels like an old dream. A relationship conflict echoes something from years ago. A sudden collapse after progress no longer feels random. Even your attractions begin to reveal a map. And the question changes from, "Why does this always happen to me?" to something much more dangerous. What part of me still believes this is what I must accept? The first sign that the contract is breaking is often not peace. It is disturbance. A strange inner discomfort around things you used to tolerate. A heaviness in rooms where you once performed perfectly. A loss of excitement for goals that used to define you. A quiet refusal rising from somewhere deeper than thought. And because you do not yet understand what is happening, you may mistake this for failure. You may begin to feel disconnected from your old life before you know what the new one is supposed to be. Certain conversations feel emptier. Certain relationships feel heavier. Certain routines feel almost unreal, as if you are acting in a play you no longer believe in. The mind tries to explain it away. It says you are tired, ungrateful, confused, dramatic. But the body knows when consent is leaving. This is the part no one prepares you for. When an old agreement starts dissolving, the life built around it can feel unstable. The desires that once moved you stop carrying force. The fears that once controlled you become visible, but not yet powerless. You are between identities. Too awake to return completely. Too uncertain to fully step forward, and this is when strange signals often appear. Dreams become more vivid. Synchronicities feel sharper. You hear a sentence at exactly the wrong time, or exactly the right one. You meet someone who mirrors what you are trying not to see. A memory returns without warning. A door closes with such precision that it feels less like rejection and more like redirection. The hidden truth is that confusion is sometimes the sound of an old structure losing control. Not every collapse is destruction. Some collapses are revelations. Some exhaustion is the body refusing to keep paying the price of a false identity. Some uncertainty is not emptiness, but space being cleared. And some endings arrive not because life has abandoned you, but because the version of you that agreed to suffer quietly is no longer in charge. This is why the breaking point can feel sacred and frightening at the same time. You are not simply changing habits. You are withdrawing belief from an inner law that once organized your whole reality. And when that law begins to weaken, the world may look unfamiliar for a while. You may not know what you want yet. You may only know what you can no longer obey. But that single knowing is the doorway to the forgotten power behind every contract. The power to renegotiate what reality is allowed to ask from you. The moment you see the contract, something ancient inside you becomes quiet. Not because everything is solved. Not because the past disappears. Not because fear suddenly loses its voice. But because you can finally recognize the voice as fear, not authority. And that recognition changes the entire structure of your life. What once felt like destiny begins to look like an agreement that was waiting to be questioned. This is the forgotten power. Not the power to erase everything that happened. Not the power to become untouched by memory. But the power to withdraw unconscious consent from what no longer carries truth. You may still feel guilt, but you do not have to obey it. You may still feel fear, but you do not have to build your future around it. You may still hear the old law, but hearing it does not mean it owns you. For a long time, you may have lived as if the past had the right to keep voting on your present. As if every old wound had authority over your choices. As if every disappointed face from your memory still had a seat at the table. And slowly, you began mistaking emotional familiarity for obligation. You stayed small because small felt safe. You stayed available because being needed felt close enough to being loved. But renegotiation begins in the invisible place where you stop betraying yourself before anyone asks you to. It begins when you notice the old impulse to explain, please, shrink, rescue, perform, or disappear. And you pause. That pause may look ordinary from the outside, but inside, it is a sacred interruption. It is the moment the old contract reaches for your signature, and you do not immediately give it. It is the first breath of authorship returning to the body. This does not mean becoming hard. It does not mean rejecting everyone who ever shaped you. It does not mean pretending you were never afraid. It means you stop letting inherited guilt speak in the language of love. You stop feeding identities that only survived because you abandoned your truth. You stop calling programming destiny simply because it has been repeated for years. And then reality begins to respond differently, not because the outer world becomes instantly perfect, but because you are no longer entering it from the same agreement. The same room feels different when you no longer ask permission to exist inside it. The same silence feels different when you no longer fill it with self-blame. The same uncertainty feels different when you understand that not knowing is not the same as being lost. The invisible contract loses power the moment it is seen. And once it is seen, the question is no longer what life made you agree to, but what you are finally ready to stop signing. Maybe the life you thought was simply happening to you has been speaking in symbols all along. The repeated relationships, the sudden exhaustion, the strange disconnection from old dreams, the doors that closed with almost impossible timing, the dreams, the coincidences, the quiet feeling that something inside you was no longer willing to obey. None of it means you were broken. It means a forgotten agreement was becoming visible. And once something becomes visible, it can no longer rule you from the dark in the same way. You may not be able to rewrite everything that formed you, but you can stop giving your present to old fear. You can stop mistaking guilt for love, survival for identity, and programming for destiny. So if this message reached you at a moment when your life feels unfamiliar, heavy, symbolic, or strangely charged with meaning, maybe it didn't arrive by accident. Maybe some part of you was finally ready to remember what you forgot. That your life is not meant to be lived as an unconscious signature beneath someone else's law. If this spoke to something you've been feeling, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave one word in the comments. Unsigned. Not as a declaration that everything is solved, but as a quiet sign that you are beginning to withdraw your consent from what was never truly yours.